Welcome back to the Church of Obelisk. Today I'm going to give you an overview over the current builds for Chen. We're going to talk about skill builds, about item builds for 729D, and hopefully by making this video I can bait the frog into releasing 730 tomorrow and making this video invalid. So let's get straight into it. Let's start with skill builds. So most of the time you probably want to get penitence first. It's a nice ability for rune fighting, for early game trading, and it's definitely the most useful spell you can have before the minute mark. The thing about Holy Persuasion first is that oftentimes you're not going to get a creep at the minute 1 because a good enemy support player is going to block your small camp. Sometimes you can get around that by going for a different camp. So for example, if you're on the Radiant, you can start here and take this small camp here. And if you can do that, then Holy Possession level 1 makes sense. But of course, this means you're going to start in a lane a little bit later. I talked a little bit about that in a previous video where I talked about Kuro playing Chen and starting with that. So if you, for example, see this at the start, this would be a really great creep to get at the start. As a Harpy, obviously, a very powerful creep at the beginning. But most of the time, you just want to go for Penitence first and then get Holy Persuasion maxed out ASAP. Divine Favor, you can optionally put a pointer into it at really any stage here. You can even put a pointer into it level 1 in some cases when you don't really want to fight too much. You just want to sustain and then get the point in Penitence at level 4. But in any case, don't put more than 1 point into this early. You can also skip it entirely and get more levels in Penitence, that's fine too. Divine Favor just is not that powerful of an ability. I actually have seen No-Tell maxes out second sometimes, but honestly I don't think that's very good. I think Divine Favor should be kept at level 1 at the start. Penitence just scales so much better. Like you get 120 attack speed level 4 with this. This is actually quite strong, and also the duration goes up, the cooldown goes down. This skill scales amazingly well. We take Hand of God whenever we can, obviously. Talents you also take whenever we can. Nowadays at level 10 talent is actually quite good. Penitence deals 250 damage. This is a very powerful talent. The other ones are also very powerful, but for the other talents there's not really a clear choice here. In each of these cases, you can make a case for either talents. They're all strong. It's just situational which ones you want to go for. But in my pop games, I usually go for the Holy Persuasion damage, the minimum health here, and the Hand of God heal. And now for the items. So most of the time, I go for this starting item build with the Blightstone, a nice laning item that can later on be upgraded into Medallion, and then some Regen, Tango, and the Healing Salve, so that you can keep yourself healthy, and also have some healing left over for your carry if he needs it. And then Sentry Ward is very important in case your small camp gets blocked. Alternatively, you can also skip the Blightstone and go for a different start. So another strong item to start with would be the Headdress. So you get the Headdress, and then you have a little bit of gold left, which you can use to buy 1 sentry. Oops, that's 2 sentries. There we go, 1 sentry. And yeah, that's also a perfectly viable way of starting. If you need more immediate regen, you can also just start with the Ring of Regen and then get some more regen to help you out in lane. The first big item you're aiming for is usually either Medallion or Mech. And obviously if you want to go for Medallion first, it's typically good to start with the Blightstone. If you want to go with Mech first, then it's often good to start with the Headdress. But most of the time I go for Medallion. Magic Wand depends when you want to buy that, depends on how much spamming in your lane is going to be, but definitely at some point you want the wand or at least the stick. And then boots, it's very situational when you get those boots. In some lanes you need boots very early so that you don't get chased down. In other lanes you can delay your boots for a long time and only get them in the mid game. All depends on whether you have heroes that can run you down in lane. But in whatever order I go for them, I almost always go for these 4 items: medallion, the wand, the boots, and the mech. And this just gives you a very solid foundation for the mid-game. Uses most of your slots. When you have wars, you still have 1 slot left for something else, maybe for a dust of appearance or for a smoke or something like that. Maybe you have some regen left from the early game. It makes efficient use of your stats and just gives you a lot of combat power with that flexible armor from medallion. Gives you some mana regen, but generally with the medallion and the wand, you should be more or less able to sustain your mana. You might have to buy a clarity here or there, but for the most part you should be fine. Now that mech only costs 100 mana. So this is the build I almost always go for. And after that you generally want to aim for either Solar Crest or Holy Locket, and then the other one if you haven't got it yet. So these are like your 3 core items you typically want to have in a Chen game if you can get away with it. Of course, if someone else in your team goes for a Solar Crest, you don't want to go for one yourself. You can just stick with the medallion. Yes. And of course, if someone else goes for mech, you don't go for mech either. But in a vacuum, these are the 3 items you want to have. Mech obviously synergizes really well with Chen's Divine Favor and also with his creeps. And it's in general a very strong, efficient item. It's so cheap these days. Solar Crest also quite cheap item these days, and of course the minus armor is quite nice with the physical damage that Chen does with his creeps, and it's just a great way of buffing up your carry. And then Holy Locket, similarly with mech, you already have a good amount of heal. It increases the heal, it increases the heal from your mech, and it works together with Divine Favor. So it's just a very powerful item on Chen. Allows you to save your allies with the active ability and just buffs all the healing that Chen naturally does. So in an ideal world, you just go for these items, but we don't often live in ideal games, and so you might have to buy some situational items. These are mostly defensive items, so if you find yourself dying too much, getting items like a Glimmer Cape, Full Staff, Ghost Scepter, depending on the situation, is great. These are just standard support items. In games where your team is really lacking in lockdown, you can also go for a fairly early run of Atos. Not something you usually want to do, but sometimes you have to. And then Vlad is just a very nice item to have in general on Chen, and really in any sort of team it's always nice to have a Vlad's. It's not like a super high priority item. Usually you want to go for these 3 first, but Vlad's is never a bad pickup. And then Pipe is something they can situationally go for against their high magic lineup, but usually it's better for like your POS 3 or your POS 4 to go for a Pipe, because it's a somewhat expensive item and it doesn't have the greatest build up. Generally speaking, you don't want to go for an early Guardian Greaves. The thing is that upgrading Guardian Greaves, as here on the screen, costs 2,825 gold. That is a lot of gold. That is actually more gold than a complete Solar Crest. Complete Solar Crest costs 200 gold less than upgrading from Boots plus Mech to a Guardian Greaves. For that same money, you could also buy a complete Vlad. It's also less expensive. You could buy, for example, a Medallion plus a Drum. Drum also a decent item to buy on Chen. Nice timing item. So there's just so many things you can buy for that gold that Guardian Greaves is not that efficient. It's more like a slot saving device, because it combines these 2 items into one, and of course it also helps with the mana household, but with just Medallion and Magic Wand, you're mostly able to sustain your mana usage. So mana boots are not that necessary on Chen. So yeah, this item, it's a nice late game luxury item, but don't rush for Guardian Greaves unless you really need that dispel. So if you say playing as a silencer, that the spell is so important that you might want to rush for Greaves, but most of the time go for these core items first. Here on this, obviously a very strong item to save yourself later on in the game. There's an item that's bought, on all supports basically, and even on many cores. Scythe, always a strong late game item on pretty much any hero. Lotus Orb, nice utility item. And if you really have a lot of gold and don't know what to do with it, you can buy an AC. Why not? Now you know how to skill and itemize as Chen. Now go forth and play Chen in preparation for the buffs that are surely coming at some point once the frog decides to actually grace us with 730. If you want to learn more about Chen and other micro heroes, tune into my stream where I play these kinds of heroes on Wednesday and Sunday, and I also analyze video replays. So if you have a replay that you want to take a look at, you can just come to my stream, post the game ID in the chat, and hopefully I can take a look at and help you out. And Obelisk filling, I'll see you there.